Well, I think we've heard the talk, and I think I could go home now, haven't we? It's a pleasure to be here today. This is a great conference. It's extremely important to assemble citizen organizers and citizen leaders to talk about what they do, what they've learned, and to convey it as broadly as possible. So I'm going to talk about the Congress, which everyone is quite awed by. And I'm going to give you a list of 10 principles for getting bills enacted, 10 principles, and then give you a few examples of how we use them. Of course, giving millions of dollars in campaign money or hiring reams of high-priced lobbyists is not a strategy option for the public interest groups. Indeed, business entities spend billions on lobbying Congress every year. It's amazing how often citizen groups win and knock down legislative battles against this. And Ralph mentioned that one of the strategies is hiring congressional staff or members of Congress when they leave their posts, when they're ready to make money and do something different. And sometimes they hire the former chief of staff of a particular member who is a chairman of a committee, let's say the Ways and Means Committee, a very important committee, so that they spend $20,000 a month hiring that person so that they can influence that member on one particular bill. That's how much money they spend. Well, when I came to Washington from Baltimore a number of years ago on a fellowship in Congress, I was scared to death. A member of Congress had me awestruck. And then a friend suggested that when I met the first member of Congress, that I envisioned him, and most of them were men at the time, in long red underwear with a top silk hat. Well, that was very helpful, more than you can imagine. My first interview was with Morris Udall. He was 6'6", and he looked like Abraham Lincoln. And the red outfit immediately popped into my mind when I met him, and I thought, oh my God, and I giggled, and it relaxed me, and then I was on my way. Never again was I awestruck by a member of Congress. It's a great technique. Citizens should not be intimidated by high-level officials, ever. Remember, they work for us. In fact, members are very sensitive to pressure, particularly members of Congress, and they always want to be liked. Never forget that, because if you get angry with them, the next thing you know, they're going to come back and want to make friends with you again, so don't worry about it. And don't forget that the US Constitution gives us explicit authority in the First Amendment to petition the government for redress of grievances. We are, in fact, carrying out the Constitution. So 10 principles. First is to divide and conquer, and then organize, organize, organize. Don't be overwhelmed by 435 members of the House or 100 of the Senate. Ralph's already put it in perspective with 300 million Americans. Why can't we control them? But it's also important when you're actually doing the work to remember that, excuse me, that Congress has many subparts. They have committees, they have subcommittees, they have leadership groups, they have state and issue caucuses, and that's where the real work occurs. So rather than having to worry about 435 members of Congress, you really only have to worry about 40 or 50, because those are the ones that are going to make the decision on your bill. And that's very doable. Second of all, second principle, find a leader. You need a leader, a member of Congress in each house who's a skilled legislator and serves on the committee of jurisdiction over the proposed bill. And preferably you want a bipartisan group, leaders. A strong leader makes the difference between winning and losing. Work with your leader to draft the bill with help from Congressional Legislative Council that he will arrange or she will arrange. Help the leaders achieve their goals and yours, and that always includes getting media. So leaders are really critical. Third, know the rules governing your legislation. The Congress has many rules, just like the courts have their own rules. You and your leader must know the pertinent rules that will decide the outcome of the bill. And I won't go into all the details, but there are lots of rules. Fourth, work closely with the congressional staff while always connecting with the member. The staff are critical because they can facilitate your work by telling you what's going on inside Congress. They often hear first what's happening on your legislation. They hear of emerging opposition, and you always want to pay attention to your opposition. They will hear about possible hearings or floor action or key rules. They can help build and support other congressional staff offices. And so the staff are really the gatekeepers for the members. You need their support. And when I say, excuse me, when I say you, I mean you as a group, not you as an individual. I think Ralph Nader is the only person who by himself got a bill enacted into law. That was 50 years ago. So you need to have a group. You need to organize. 5, you need to prepare materials to support your bill. You need to argue why you want this piece of legislation. You've got to make sure they're 100% accurate, concise, interesting, and designed to persuade with graphs and pictures if pertinent. Different documents must be prepared for congressional offices, for the media, and for coalition groups. Because you want to build a coalition. That is how you get legislation through from the consumer perspective. They must include data and research with sources listed in at least one of your documents. You can get information from the internet, from libraries, from the Congressional Record, from Freedom of Information Act requests to government agencies, from free government publications, university professors, other public interest experts, the Government Accountability Office, and so on. So there are lots of sources for you to get your information, and by the way, also from the industry that's relevant to what you're talking about. But the bottom line is a one-page summary. A one-page summary is dynamite, because when I first started working as a lobbyist, General Motors would come in with notebooks. Ralph was so cheap, he wouldn't let us have a Xerox machine. So we had to use a mimeograph machine, which is a pain in the neck. Maybe some of you have never heard of a mimeograph machine, it's so old. And so in order to type, if you made a mistake, you had to erase it with some liquid and wait till it dried and then retype it and so on. So we did one-page summaries. It was just too much trouble to do more than that. And what I learned was with a member of Congress, you hand them one sheet of paper. They take the piece of paper, they fold it like this, they fold it like this, and they put it in their pocket. Now, where would you want to be with your information and that member of Congress? You want to be on his inside pocket. So always remember, give him a very concise material. 6, develop as broad a coalition as possible to advocate for the bill. Join with consumer groups and victim groups, labor entities, strange bedfellows such as individual businesses or business groups that sometimes break off from the rest of them. Prominent individuals, other nonprofits, groups concerned with the substance of your bill, for example, it's an environmental bill, all the environmental organizations, citizens from the congressional district with maximum organizing and minimum procedure for participating. 7, find and involve victims of the harm that you're trying to remedy, focusing particularly on victims from your leader's district and from those of members who oppose the legislation. If you bring in a victim and have it presented to somebody who's opposed the legislation, they kind of melt. And that's what you want to do. You want to melt your opposition. 8, excuse me. Media coverage of your bill or your issue is critical to your legislative success. You want to get the media to tell people about it. The broader circulation, the better, i.e. the New York Times or the Washington Post or Wall Street Journal, AP, television networks, but these are hard to achieve. But there are also thousands of other media outlets, from regional dailies to Politico to 24-hour television and radio news, social media on the internet, and so on. And to get the media to pay attention, you need to tell a sympathetic story. Why you're doing this, you need to explain the story. You need to engage in a major fight. Involved, Hollywood, sports, etc. Put on a show like crash testing a car, and I know that's easier said than done, but it's one example I've used. Prepare accurate fact sheets, synthesizing the issues and facts. Be very, 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 very persistent. Competition for media coverage is very fierce, and so you want to really entice them into it. 9, get the executive branch, if possible, to support the bill. This can be critical to your success. It has vast resources, can provide essential information. An agency head or the president can express an opinion, which really helps. It can release a report or paper that turns the tide. It can threaten to veto or express support through the Office of Management and Budget. Getting the right people early in the administration is very important. It doesn't always work, but it's important. And 10, the educational value of congressional hearings on your bill is unquestioned. Members will engage and educate other members who support or oppose reporting the bill out of committee to get to the floor, which is what you want. Getting committee members to support, it is essential to get it debated on the House floor or the Senate floor. To be successful, you need a variety of the best witnesses to argue for the bill, including some victims if possible, always victims. Legal or technical experts, representatives from the coalition, high-level officials, and so on. After the committee vote, a report will be prepared for consideration on the floor of each house. Read the report in draft if possible to make sure it has covered your issues effectively. And some staff, that's where the staff come in. They might let you do that. Okay, so this is not an easy set of principles to achieve, but it is how you actually have to work to get a bill enacted into law. And there's a wonderful publication called How a Bill Becomes a Law that you can get from your member of Congress, which goes into some more detail with a little bit less emphasis on victims, which is what I've added to this. So now I'd like to give you some real-life examples of some experiences that I've had in trying to get bills enacted into law. Amendments to the Freedom of Information Act in the 70s were highly technical legal provisions, but our House leader was not an attorney, and he wanted to compromise away our specific remedies. And as I said, you want strong leaders. He was not. Luckily, Senator Ted Kennedy secured these provisions without insulting or angering the House leader. A weak leader can cause extra work and can, worse yet, can ruin the hard work that's been put into your legislative effort. So always try and get strong leaders. Bipartisan sponsorship of controversial proposals achieves miracles. It really is amazing. As Ralph points out in his excellent book, Unstoppable. And if you want to read a fun book about how you really get action on not only Congress but in other issues, read Unstoppable by Ralph Nader. We wanted window stickers on the windows of new cars showing how each vehicle performed in crash tests. Highly controversial idea. The auto industry was vehemently opposed to it. But we persuaded Republican Senator Mike DeWine to propose this as an amendment to a Democratic bill, and it just sailed through. The auto industry melted. They didn't know how to oppose somebody who was sort of their guy. Another example is that we stopped FedEx in their huge push for longer trailers. They wanted to go from 28 to 33 feet, the length of an 8-story high building on the highway. I mean, it was like a train on the highway. Its multimillionaire CEO Fred Smith personally lobbied many senators to whom he gives big campaign contributions. But Senator Dianne Feinstein agreed to oppose this provision, and we needed a Republican. So we had to sort of do a little search, and we found that through a transportation leader in, of all places, Mississippi, who opposed these larger trucks because Mississippi highways really couldn't handle them. And he got Senator Roger Wicker in the Senate to work with Dianne Feinstein, and it was a winning combination, along with our full-bore lobbying to educate and inform members of the deadly consequences of these bigger trucks. We had pictures of the trucks, we had victims of the trucks, we had pictures of FedEx trucks having crashes with these extra trailers, because they were allowed in a few states. Our meager truck safety coalition simply outsmarted the mogul with all the bucks. So it's a matter of strategizing, creativity, telling the truth, and having some visual ability to communicate it. The importance of staff, this is one of my favorite ones, was revealed when Senator Trent Lott, have you all heard of Trent Lott? Do you know who he is, right? Okay, and he and I had a huge battle over campaign finance reform, and so he did not like me. Okay, so he took over the Highway Safety Subcommittee, and he wouldn't let me testify on a bill dealing with rollovers. So we went to the top staffer of the committee chair. He was not the chair. We went to the chair, Ted Stevens of Alaska, who didn't have a dog in this fight, as they say, who arranged for a small private meeting with us, Senator Stevens, Senator Lott, and Ranking Senator Dan Inouye of Hawaii. Lott was very irritated. He walked into the meeting really mad, but he came because his chair had told him he had to. And we presented our case in about 10 minutes, very concise, about the dangers of rollover in cars and why something needed to be done in the Congress. And he really got interested in the safety issues, and one of the things he said was, you know, I get it. He says, my son makes me strap those babies inside, front ways and back ways and upside down and inside out. Those are his grandchildren. And so he began to imagine and understand what we were talking about. He then heard a brief presentation by the auto industry, but by then his mind was made up. The end result, he became our advocate. He got a bill requiring rollover safety standards enacted into law in 6 months, and all we needed was the opportunity there to present our case. So we knew we had to connect with this senator who didn't like me and wanted us not to talk to him. Afterwards, I ran into him in the hall, and he said, "I guess you like me a little bit better, Joan, now that I passed your bill." He's from Mississippi. One effort we made in Texas was to line up the House Committee Chair, Barton, and we connected somehow with his minister, whose daughter had been killed in a rollover crash. Now, that was really potent. It melted him. And doctors often lobby, the Congress. They use the family doctor to do it. Victims are the best path to getting members of Congress to advocate legislation, and that happened with the motor coach bill. There have been no safety standards for motor coach for years. And so when some students were killed in a crash going to a sports event, the senators from Ohio, who was where the school was located, from Georgia, where the crash occurred, and that included John Lewis, Kay Bailey Hutchinson in Texas, where there were a lot of these crashes, and she'd been on the Transportation Safety Board and understood why these things were needed. That is seat belts and roof crush and exit capacity. And so we got the bill introduced, and then the motor coach industry said, well, it was going to cost tens of millions of dollars to put this into effect. And once again, we questioned that, and so we looked it up, and there's 700 million people who travel, rides, not people, but individual rides, every year on these buses. And so we figured out that the cost was about 10 cents per person per ride. And when we revealed that, the opposition couldn't make their case. And so once again, we won that. My last one is, I'll tell you a story about Archer Daniel Millions in Cargill, who didn't want to have placards on their trucks carrying agricultural chemicals, which are extremely dangerous. They said it cost too much. So we went on the internet, and we found that the placards cost 53 cents each. So you've always got to question what the arguments of the other side are. So we bought 535 placards. I wonder why, right? We delivered one to each member of Congress to explain the falsity of the industry claim, and we said, is a firefighter worth 53 cents? That was it, right? So I would just like to say that there are so many things you can do. We've given awards to members of Congress who have done really great work. They love to get awards. They want to be loved. We have taken ads out in their local newspaper, which is really cheap, and thank them for what they did, and then we get it framed, and then we deliver it to their office so they can put it on their wall. We persuaded Bill Clinton to veto a very controversial product liability bill by surrounding him with victims. And he was so happy to veto that bill, even though he hated vetoing bills. And so I would just say that we also helped Robert Redford defeat the Interior Secretary that Gerald Ford nominated because he was engaged in banking fraud. He had been the governor of Wyoming. We lost the vote in committee, but we raised such a stink, and we got so much media involved that they continued the investigation. They proved he had engaged in fraud, and he had to resign. So you never know. You never know where the end is going to be, but since we're the ones who are on the honest side of the ledger, and we're the ones who raise the key issues that people care about, we often win, even though we have so little to help us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan.